Welcome back once again to FyneConf 2021. In this second community segment, we're taking an opportunity to give you a sneak peek in some of the work that's currently going on behind the scenes. First of all, I would like to hand over to Jacob, who's going to talk about packaging through Flatpak.
Hello everyone, and welcome to my talk about Flatpak, and more precisely, Flatpak your Fyne app. My name is Jakob Alsen, and I'm going to talk about a modern packaging format and how to package Fyne apps for it. Now you might ask, why Flatpak? Well, let's first get to know what it is. And Flatpak is the next generation technology for building and distributing desktop applications on Linux. And in general, it's a modern packaging format that allows you to build an application once and then run it on any Linux distribution. And this whole format, from top to bottom, is 100% free and open source, unlike other packaging formats such as Snap, which is the main competitor to Flatpak. And a very big part of the benefits of using Flatpak is also that all the applications run inside a sandbox. And this means that the applications have like a layer between which prevents them from accessing certain parts of the host system. And it also has the benefit that you can control permissions similar to what you do on, for example, iOS and Android. And here you see an example of Wormhole GUI changing permissions for it inside the GNOME settings application. And part of the benefits of Flatpak working on any Linux distribution is that you can install a wide range of applications. And currently the biggest application store for Flatpaks is flathub.org, where you can find hundreds, maybe thousands of applications. Now, let's get into building our Fyne app for Flatpak. And first of all, we need a manifest file which we can use to control the build. And in this case, it's a YAML file that should have the name of the app ID of the application. And in this case, in our little example, it's io.fyne.flatpak_demo, which you can also find on the Fyne.io organization. We want to use the runtime, the regular free desktop platform with the latest version, and then use the SDK when we're building, and then we need an SDK extension for Go so we can compile our Go code. And then we also need a couple arguments to specify what parts of the system that this application will need to access. And this is where build requirements come in. We need IPC share for better X11 performance, and X11 so we can render applications on the screen. We need the direct rendering interface device so we can do OpenGL rendering support. And if you use the Fyne preferences or the new document storage APIs in Fyne 2.1, you'll also want the fourth line there under finish args for giving access to the Fyne preferences folder. And there it is important in this case that you use the same app ID as you do in app.new with ID when creating your Fyne application if you want that fourth row to work. It's also worth noting here that no network access is enabled inside the build containers by default, or when building, I should say. This means that you need to work around that in some way, and I've personally found the best way to enable vendoring and then commit the vendoring to the GitHub repo, and then it will be included inside your archive that you download from the release on, for example, GitHub. It's also worth noting here that we need AppStream meta info to provide information about the application, screenshots, description, summary, and that sort of things. We also need a desktop file which we can include inside the operating system to launch the application, and of course an icon to show off our application. And these, you'll find the install command there, it's all in the example. And then we just want to fetch the archive from our release and then get the SHA-256 hash from it. Then it's also worth to reiterate this with the sandbox, with the runtime requirements. We want minimum system and hardware access by as long as it's possible. We don't want to expose more features through the sandbox than we really need. This is why this example, in the upcoming example, I have just exported the documents folder. If you don't need access to webcams and such, don't enable it. And again, look at the demo there, find a lot of instructions on how to build. Speaking of building, with the following command we can build and install the Flatpak in one step. And if we look inside the GNOME software, we'll find that the application is available locally with all of the information from our meta info file, and that's that, I should say. Now, let's do a little demo. As I said before, I've just opened up the documents folder for this example, and that's why we will see now that when I open the file manager, or file dialog I should say, that we just see the documents folder in the home directory. The sandbox doesn't give any other access to our application. We can see the contents of the file in the computer directory, but we can't edit them. And if we go into the document folder, we have an example.md, a markdown file. If we open that, we'll see that our application launches with all the contents, and it's using the great new markdown support in Fyne 2.1. Now let's talk about the next steps when it comes to Flatpak. First of all, we of course need to publish the first Fyne application on flathub.org. And then there are a few improvements that we can do to the Flatpak support in Fyne. For example, right now, notification seems to not be working. For that to work, we most likely need to use something called a portal, which opens up for secure communication through the sandbox. And we can most likely use another portal to improve the file handling to avoid opening up all of the folders necessary for an application and just letting a user choose which file they want to permit to go through the sandbox. And we'll also of course want to show Flatpak supported applications on apps.fyne.io, just like we do with Android and iOS apps at the moment. That was what I had. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much, Jacob. I hope this makes packaging and distribution for Linux systems a lot easier over time. And next up, I'd like to introduce Cedric, who's going to talk to us about the much-awaited delivery of Fyne applications through a web browser.
So, hello everyone. I'm going today to be presenting about WebGL and WASM. I'm Cedric By, and I've been doing C and C++ development for decades, and now I'm doing a little bit of code for fun. My GitHub and my contact us here. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any question. So why a web port? It does provide a quick access to a preview experience of Fyne application. So you could easily get user to kind of check it out, what it will be. The ease of deployment, update, and reach to customer via the web is still way better than other method. So there is that zero installation, last version up to date access. Hopefully it will be fast enough for most people to be able to use it. But that's why I'm kind of saying it's a preview experience, because I still think it will be still better to go native in most cases for users in terms of ease of experience. But the web technology are evolving very fast, and they're aiming to deliver high-end application experience. So it's really something where a Fyne application should just work. And so I've been working on my spare time, and I've done most of the work maybe 2 years ago for getting Fyne demo to just work out of the box. There is a lot of detail that we're out to get, but here we are. So what are the technology that we're using for making Fyne working on the web? We're using WebGL. It does require a GPU, but it does provide basically OpenGL in a browser, which makes life really easy to make it working. The also nice thing is that WebGL works on most smartphones these days, so you can actually try your web app version of your Fyne app on a smartphone, and it will also work there. The other technology that we're using is WebAssembly. WebAssembly is very cutting-edge, evolving ecosystem, and it does allow for compiling from native language to the web and run things really fast enough. And it's not as fast as native. It does have a few technical restrictions on what you can do, but it's really usable, and a lot of code can actually be straight used from native world into the web world thanks to WebAssembly. So that's a pretty cool. A lot of all the major browser these days kind of support it, so it does enable a lot of possibilities there. So Fyne demo on the web. That's basically what it is. The main blocker has been for years that the resize of a window was not asynchronous, and there was it was hard to get it right. That was unblocked a few weeks ago, and so it's now time to get that PR back in shape and get it landed in Fyne. There is a limited feature support at the moment for Fyne, so like file selector, no multi-window. Detail like that, and I'm not really iron, so it's really a tech preview at this point. But in time, most of this limitation should be lifted and should be working nicely. And I've set up a temporary website for demo there that you should be able to just check Fyne demo at that fyne.zlm.me address. By the time you are able to see this video, hopefully I will have updated my website, and it will be the last version. But this one is Fyne from 2 years ago, so you can see it has Fyne. If you look at Fyne demo today, it has changed a bit, but nevertheless, it's just working. You can see that you have animation, you have icons, image, and things are there. There is still some work to get things ironed out, but it's looking good. And so that's how I will conclude my talk. And have a good day, everyone.
Thank you very much for that, Cedric. I can't wait until we're able to help people get their applications delivered through a web browser as well. For the last section of this tech preview segment, I wanted to share with you a work in progress to do with cloud integration that's been part of our development over the last few months. Before I get in, I need to note that this is to be taken with caution. It's all heavily work in progress, and it's not really part of the main project yet. But with that, why would we want to be looking at cloud? Well, as the diagram illustrates here, it's about having all of your files available to all of your computers. Fyne is already available to be deployed on all of those devices, so it makes sense that we would want to make the files as easily available. Like I said, the applications run everywhere, but the data is currently local to the device that you're running on. At the moment, people are working remotely. They might be on home, on the train, or back in the office. Where are your files going to be? Well, this is part of our belief that users should have access to their data wherever and whenever, and that's where cloud comes in. There are de facto standard platform providers already, but they've not yet been integrated into the Fyne ecosystem. And we think it should be just as easy to integrate cloud data into your applications as it was to build your first GUI using Fyne. And so on to the API design. We wanted to keep it simple, and at the heart, it's about a provider advertising what it's capable of delivering to an application. So here you can see we've got two illustrations, a cloud provider that can deliver preference storage, and a cloud provider that could deliver storage of documents as well. They basically describe two methods that would be required for a cloud provider to implement. And you'll notice there is a common element on both called cloud provider. This cloud provider API is really about metadata, something that enables each to identify itself to the user, and you'll see why that's important a little later. But how does this get wired into your application? Well, there's one more line that's going to be important. Application has a new function called set cloud provider. And so if your application connects to a standard backend and you're the developer of that, you can implement a wrapper for that provider and hook it in exactly here so that your application uses the provider that you've configured for preference and document storage. However, that's great if you want to deliver a specific backend, but what if users look to choose? So we would like to enable as well, so that developers can enable cloud storage without necessarily controlling where that cloud is. Users would then be able to choose their provider. This data would be stored globally to the user's desktop or device, and it would apply to all cloud-enabled Fyne applications, which means you set it up just once and it's going to work for all other applications that you install. It moves the cost of delivery off the developer because they don't have to build the infrastructure to the user who may choose to sign up with a new provider, or they might have one already set up on their computer or an account on a provider that they're going to choose to use. And also, this is really minimal effort to activate. In fact, instead of needing to build any functionality, any infrastructure, or even any wrappers, you simply add one line of code into your application, cloud.enable, passing the app object. And this is going to set up all of the information that the application is going to need to utilize cloud functionality. There will be the option for users to make their selection configuration of the cloud infrastructure through a separate application. But if you would like to be able to hook in some user configuration inside your application, then that's going to be supported, perhaps in this manner, where we have a sync option in the file menu of the application. That would open a settings dialog for the cloud, and that will look a little bit like this perhaps. The user can choose which cloud provider is going to handle their storage and potentially configure it as well. That's what the API looks like and how we're hoping to deliver it. But why don't we have a quick demo? To demonstrate the current functionality in our cloud work, I've got an updated version of the Notes application. It's been updated with the cloud integration, and the menu has been hooked in as demonstrated in the code earlier. You can see that this has a file menu with the sync option. If we click on this, it will load the dialog that allows us to choose our cloud provider, using the theme of the current application, of course. On the other window here, I have a remote connection to another computer, which is running the same software in light mode, and this has the same setup, and I could go to the file menu and set up sync on this one as well. And what you will notice is that the content is the same. When I go to edit something on one copy, we see after a small delay the same information popping up over here. Whether it is the currently editing note or something else entirely, like this second one, the data is going to stay up to date and propagate across all of my computers and instances of the Fyne application automatically. So there you have our cloud integration work in progress. There's still a lot more work to do. I just thought I'd outline some of the next steps here. We absolutely want to add more standard cloud providers so that developers choosing to let the user select their provider have a larger list. We're currently working just with Dropbox, so there's a lot more to come. There's more to be added in the API. The document storage that came in 2.1 isn't yet propagated over to the cloud work in progress, so that's definitely next step as well. We're going to want to work with lots of developers who would like early access to this functionality to make sure that we're getting things right, that latency isn't too high and that functionality is just exactly what they would like. And then we want to work with more cloud providers to see if they would be interested in adding more integrations that were either part of the user choice or available to developers so they could set that up for their projects. And then of course we need to choose a feature release. It's not been decided yet when this will be made available, so why not work with us on that, and it might be available sooner.